Nerds International proudly presents
Alfheim, the fourth realm of Earth, a world of fantasy adventure awaiting your imagination.
Warp Shell, a universe in ruin. Countless heroic tales waiting to be weaved through space and time.
Ghost Mountain, a place caught between heaven and hell, filled with fireside tales of the Wild West. These are the worlds of Index Card RPG, and this is a podcast about those worlds.
Welcome to the Threats, Treats, and Timers podcast, episode 8. I am one of your hosts, Gary, aka the Murder Hobo, and I am here with, as always, none other than
Y'all ready for this?
Victor Diaz, the man, the myth, the legend. Actually, Victor was unable to make it to the show because of life. He will be back, but the show must go on. So instead, I've replaced him with the next best thing. Introducing the amazing Alex Alvarez. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, how is everyone? I'm super honored and super thrilled to be here, Gary. Thanks so much for bringing me on the show.
Well, we're 46 seconds into this episode, so you can say that now, but by the end, you'll probably be tracking me down.
I'm thrilled to be here for sure.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're going to be talking about magic today. I noticed that on the boards a lot of time people have issues with magic, and it's almost like being that ICRPG is basically just a toolkit of things that you can use in your own game. It seems to me that sometimes if people don't sort of get their, for lack of a better word, handheld through how something works, they sort of just do this thing where they sort of shut down instead of just letting the creative gates flow, which is the purpose of ICRPG. So we're going to talk about magic today. I took ICRPG down to my local gaming store and ran Flight of the Red Sort for a group of gamers that have neither seen, heard, or played ICRPG ever, and it was bloody amazing. And we're going to get into that when we talk about what's going on in the news section.
Okay, everybody, this one's dedicated to the old country, where I used to sip on bourbon all day, slay goblins, and get some sweet loot. It's called Walking Through Alfheim. Come on. Walking through Alfheim, getting to know a wilder kind, looking for a purpose in a tavern side. I would meet you anywhere. Cold and Lagar meets the air. Tirolo Stanos, never looking behind. Yeah! Woo! Alfheim, everybody! Woo! Shit! Where's the whiskey?
So I reached out to the community. I got myself an Alex, and we've been shooting the turd for about 40 minutes, and I'm like, man, we really should record some stuff on this podcast. So here we are. Alex, we're going to talk about my first time playing ICRPG as a dungeon master with a group of people that have never seen it before, ever. It was the most incredible and amazing experience that I've ever had teaching anybody. Right now I'm doing a Savage Worlds 50 Fathoms campaign, and because both of these are fresh in my mind, I just did ICRPG, I'm going to say less than a month ago. The D&D group needed a day off, so I'm like, hey, I'll run this Flight of the Red Sword one-shot kind of a deal. And then shortly after that, the DM guy's like, I need a break. So I'm like, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll do ICRPG Fantasy or Space, or I'll do Deadlands, which is Savage Worlds Wild West with guns, or we're going to do 50 Fathoms. Those are the 4 things that I'm willing to run for you guys. So we chose 50 Fathoms, which is a pirate setting that I am absolutely in love with.
Oh, cool.
So I'm teaching Savage Worlds to a bunch of guys, and it's complicated. But it's not, but it is. As opposed to ICRPG. My first time with ICRPG and this same group, some of the exact same players, was a matter of, here's your character sheets, put 6 points into one of your attributes or into your weapons, basic or magic, or your ultimate, maybe your armor if you want to, depending on what kind of character. Whatever your idea is where you're going to associate your points, just like you would do for D&D. 20 minutes. Everybody had their characters done. They had chosen their starting equipment and whatnot because it was just that easy, and we were up and running. I started to describe the warp shell, how it came out of warp space. They popped out of their chambers, their cold storage chambers, and got filled up with a bunch of sauces, because there is a blurb in Flight of the Red Sword that I almost missed where you get an extra heart from the warp shell. And then I put them into the umbilicus, and they grabbed their gear and stuff, and away we went. And the only thing that because I was trying not to explain the rules, because there really isn't much in the way of rules, was I was trying to impart on them that they should be looking for loot all the time. And so the very first room, which one of them does the blink, I don't remember which character it is now off the top of my head, but he walks up to the door and he's like, I'm going to blink through this wall. And I'm like, all right, well, that bypasses the security system, right? Yeah, so he portals through to the other side, turns around, hits the big red button on the wall, the door opens, everybody comes into this warehouse. Now, Flight of the Red Sword is a pirate ship, like a Torton pirate ship. It's infamous throughout the galaxy if nobody knows. So I'm like, first room they come into is going to be the storage room where they keep all of their booty and their loot and stuff. So I'm explaining all of these crates and boxes and things and stuff and money, and not one of them took the bait, and they're like, I'm going to go search it, because it's a new game, they're not sure what they can do, so they all just kind of sat there like, I'm like, maybe you guys want to find some loot. So then I had them roll on the table, which was pretty cool. They found a suit. Can't remember what the suit is called, but it gives them a bunch of stuff, and one of them got to put it on. It's like a rebreather kind of a deal and whatnot. So
nice.
Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to look for loot. So I let them all roll, so they got extra loot right out of the gate. And then the very next room they walk into is the sort of the neck of the ship. And in this, the timer die expired, so I had Tortons come and attack them, these mutated reptoids. And as they're in the neck of the ship getting attacked by this, the tank guy, Wesley, decides that his tank is the kind of tank that just runs away from battle. I'm like...
Let you make a tank.
Right? I'm like, you're the tank, right? He's like, yeah, but these things are creepy and I'm out of here. So I'm like, okay, which way are you running? Well, he runs into the bridge. The rest of them, there was 3 other people, and they stayed in this main room and they were fighting them. One was a magic caster. The other one was the blip that could shoot around and stuff. Actually, there was just the 2 of them. 3 of them showed up. Wesley runs into the bridge, and I explained to him when he gets in there that there's like 7 or 8 of them crawling around the ceiling and, popping up behind chairs. And he's like, oh my God, I'm going to turn around and run back. So while he runs back, Sarah and William, the magician, she was the Fragment, I think is the sci-fi one, right? Her and William, who was playing the blip, are fighting these ones. They pop up onto the roof, do a bunch of gravity stuff, and they're fighting these Tortons, and Wesley just sort of runs his tank right through and heads south and doesn't stop. And they're taking the beatings and stuff, right? So anyways, it actually resolved itself really well, because Sarah, being the amazing player that she is, basically blipped over, or she jumped at one of them, cast Arcane Bomb, and put it on his chest, which is 4d12 ultimate damage. And then she cast Invisibility on her and William, so they're unseen. The only thing that the Tortons can see, these messed up reptoids, are Wesley running down the hallway screaming. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess they're all going to bunch together and chase Wesley down the hallway. And then she rolled, I think, 1 or 2 rounds or something like that, which was enough time for them to group together, run down the hallway and explode. And she did like 40 some odd points to these things, literally just turned them into a giant pile of pink mist. It was amazing how it resolved itself. Yeah, it was super cool, man. That said, cool. They went down the hallway a little bit. I think they went back to the bridge. They looked around. They realized what was going on with the ship and stuff. I'm going to make my long story short here. Figured out that they needed to fly the ship into the whatchamacallit. In one of the southern rooms, Sarah died and William died, and the only person that was left was the tank. And because he realized that he let his party down, he ran back to the bridge and smashed the go button when he figured out that he needed to fly the ship into the sun. And he didn't even get off the ship. He just tears coming down his face as he's like, I'm sorry I let you guys down. And he hits the thrusters and he just shoots himself into the sun. And that was the end of that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was super fun, dude.
I bet everybody loved it too, and the ease of the system and all that. I'm sure they had a ball.
There was no fuss, no muss. The target number, once they got the gist of it, within 15 minutes of playing the game and doing a few rolls, there was no confusion. Everybody knew exactly what to do. And then the mechanics got out of the way and the story just sort of fell into place and just took over. And it was beautiful because it was just us telling a story. You go to the game store to play this game or to play any kind of a role-playing game, to sit down, throw some dice, and do some epic, cool stuff. Being new to ICRPG like I am, I'm sort of 6 months familiar with all of Hankerin stuff. The Drunken and Dragon stuff is sort of pre where I came into it because of Victor. But since then, I've again trying to absorb everything. I realized that what his premise with it is, and once you go to somebody's turn, you want to have them do a thing that involves a dice roll, whether it's looking for something, maybe trying to find some loot, repairing something, reading a scroll, doing something where they get a chance to roll the dice and be successful at a thing before you carry on to the next person. So that was my premise. They were always, every time it come around, I would make sure that they had a reason to pick up that dice and try and beat their challenge and either succeed or fail at something before I moved on to the next person. And it's so fast, man, and it's just it was cool. Super fun. Yeah. Anyways, that was my story. Now I'd like to hear your story. When did you first pick up ICRPG? What did you play, and how did it go?
Yeah, so my story's a little bit different. And I don't know that I can point to a single game necessarily in a way, but I had been involved beginning with the Drunken and Dragons channel, well over a year and a half ago. I was watching the videos, I was taking down notes, I adopted using a DM journal. I was making terrain at the house, and at the time I had a home 5e group who was showing up to the house not every week, but every few weeks. And so we were playing in 5e, but what happened is that I slowly had started to incorporate a lot of the concepts from the Drunkens and Dragons channel that later became the basis for ICRPG. I'd already started incorporating a lot of those concepts into my games. So my group was already rolling against a single room target, and that single room target was publicly displayed, which was a vast departure from 5e. And then slowly but surely, I slowly started to kind of morph that group into an ICRPG group. And then certainly by the time that the core rules came, I converted everybody over in earnest. And we didn't look back. I mean, it was super easy to convert their kind of abilities and feats into loot. It was super easy to convert their stats into stats. And we just completely played. In fact, that adventure was the Moloch line. So it escaped from Moloch, and I took that group all the way through, beginning in 5e and then finished up with ICRPG, and it was just an absolute blast. That being said, I will say probably the first time I ever ran ICRPG, I ran it for Matt Shaker and John Bentz and Mike and Matthew, who were part of a Big Bad Evil Guy. I ran it for them using an adventure that I wrote called the Icy Tomb, where these guys kind of start out in the north in this kind of frost covered area, and they fight these kind of wolves, and there's this guy who's been running, and they uncover this kind of ornate necklace, and that leads them down into this tomb as these kind of skeletal warriors close in, and they fight their way down through the tomb, and the cold becomes more and more oppressive the further they go down, and they fight kind of these elite kind of skeletal or zombie warriors, and then they make their way into the icy tomb itself, where they take on the war chieftain and his large dog, and they're spectral. And what it turns out is that the necklace ultimately that they had uncovered is actually the dog's collar. One of them gets smart and is kind of investigating the tomb, and they see these kind of iced over bodies, and it appears that it's been the victim of a grave robber. And so they take this collar and they put it back on the dog, and the specter shapes disappear, and all is set right in the area. And that was the first time that I ran ICRPG fully for a group, other than my 5e group that I converted over. And I will say, all the things that you point out, it is certainly the fastest, most intuitive system that I've come across. I appreciate it a lot as a DM, because I can make decisions on the fly. I can adjudicate almost everything that comes up with an easier hard roll, and we just move on, and there's never a break or anything that disengages a player from the fiction, which I really appreciate. And then I also love it as a player because it's fast. I get equal time as anybody else at the table. As you point out, I get to make rolls. Like I like heroes that get to feel like heroes. And I just can't say enough good things about this system. And I've run it now dozens of times since it's come out and since I adopted the concepts. And it has always been, I've always had that experience.
Inside of the group, my Nerds International group, Genesis just came out. Jamie Pearson throws up this deal where he's like, Genesis, the new Savage Worlds killer, which nothing ever kills anything. But it just started this whole like hate on thing between Savage Worlds and Genesis that turned out to be like a 100-post comment about literally like nothing. He's played in my ICRPG game, and I recently heard him say something super dumb. And so he made this comment about how the one thing that he didn't like about ICRPG was whether you're jumping a 5-foot gap in the ground or a 20-foot gap, the target number is always the same. And it's the one thing that came to my mind is like, it's not always the same, because you have easy rolls and hard rolls. So if it's a 20-foot gap, you're not rolling that target number. You're rolling that target number plus 3, which is like 15% more difficult. And at that rate, I wouldn't even let you begin to jump a 20-foot, whatchamacallit, without a pole or some kind of magic anyways. Like
right.
People don't jump 20 feet. Do you know what I'm saying? But
exactly.
There's so many things about ICRPG that are just bam, 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 right now, that you don't stop, pick up your book. What does this spell do? I'll give you my 50 fathoms, Michael, this guy's playing, he's doing Bolt. Bolt you can cast 3 bolts for 2d6 apiece. Every bolt does 2d6 damage. That's 3 power points, and that's the maximum that you can do for that. Unless you can do 2 power points and do 1 single big 3d6 bolt. But when I'm trying to explain that to Michael, he's reading that you can cast like 1 point per bolt, which I think actually you might be able to do. No, I think it caps at 3. See? Here I am right now thinking it in my head and trying to make sure that if I'm right, I need to go get my Savage Worlds book and look up bolt to make sure. I think it's a maximum of 3. There isn't this what's happening to me right now inside of ICRPG, because it's such a simplified system that I don't need to stop the podcast in the middle of it and say, hey, let me go get my bolt book so that I can make sure that we're doing this right according to the rules, right? And that's what ICRPG eliminates. So it's just fantastic when it comes to stuff like that. This will be my 3rd game. Well, I've got one up and coming, my Rise of the Red King that I was talking about. I'm going to be running that for some friends. The previous one that I did was based off of one simple sentence in the core book. Where is my core book? I'm not even going to bother looking it up. It has to do with the king Norberg. The Norberg is this little city in the top of this mountainside cliff. And it's like this Norse city that has these Viking guys in it. And based on their tales, you can have that's how they choose who their leader's going to be, like over the stuff they've done over the years. Well, there's this Lich Deceiver guy that's taken over the position of one of these guys, and it's just that's all there is to it, man. Lich Deceiver takes over the kingship thing in the city of Norberg, and I built like a 6-hour adventure in Tabletop Simulator around one sentence, which was actually really fun. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Anyways, we would like to congratulate the winner of the ICRPG Monster Manual one-sheet book giveaway deal thing that we did. Kevin did this critter called the Forsyth, and it's Victor rolled the dice, and he was the winner. So, yeah, this is
nice.
This is old news. He's got the book. It's in the mail. It's been shipped out. But I would like to say thanks to Kevin and everyone else that entered. There was some really great inspirational material there. And I've been putting together that material into a form-fillable monster manual that I'm going to do, like, anytime I see anybody that puts a monster on the community, I'm going to start grabbing them and then dropping them into, like, a unified one. Speaking of critters, I see you did some art for the Junk Titan for Matt Shaker's game. That looks incredibly wicked. That deal is, what is it? It's like a golem put together with some junk and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I may be jumping the gun here, but Matt Shaker has done a phenomenal job with this series of adventures called the Sea of Rust that I've been fortunate enough to play in with some really cool cats. And at the kind of the end and the final boss battle is this junk titan that comes together with this power core that the party is looking for. And when we originally ran the game, I think as a lot of rushed DMs do. We were playing online on Roll20. Matt had grabbed a piece of found art for that boss, and as he kind of refined the Sea of Rust into a module that I think he kind of wants to put out, he approached me for a custom piece of art for the Junk Titan rather than using somebody else's work. Yeah, I was super flattered that he would ask me to put together. My art is certainly not that great, and it's nowhere near Hank's level or some of the level of art that I see out there. But that project really intrigued me, and so I did a quick few concept sketches, sent them to Matt. He approved them, and then I went back and refined it and did the line work on my tablet, and then added the shading in, and Hank kind of helped me with the size and putting a little guy in the corner for the matter of perspective.
Yeah.
so it looks, really huge, and I hopeful that will be beneficial to Matt's game. I was super flattered that he would ask me to do a piece of art, and I hope it looks good. For sure.
It does. I've seen the art. It looks fantastic. I like that premise for like a monster, like compiled of bits. Monster a Day for D&D was this thing that was on Reddit for a while, and one of them is a bunch of small little robots, and they're literally next to nothing. This is another ICRPG thing too. Hankerin was talking about, like, you have 3 phases. You have the first group that your party encounters. They're kind of wimps, and your party tears through them. And the next one should be maybe those guys buffed up a little bit where they're a little bit tougher, so that now they're a bit of a fight. And then the last sort of group that they have to go through needs to be the badasses, where your party's like, oh my god, we're getting our arses kicked, kind of a thing. But I like that premise in my monsters as well, where in the Monster a Day stuff, there's these little robot guys that they're just nothing. You toe punt them and they explode, kind of a thing. But they have this cool feature when they come together that they form a giant ass golem, and they turn into a massive rolling ball of destruction if you start messing with these poor little robot guys, which is pretty cool. But man, your art for that Junk Titan looks fantastic. Matt Shaker's,
thank you very much.
Matt Shaker's Sea of Rust. I guess that's why we haven't seen, or I haven't seen anything, because I did watch. I've talked about this before, but one of the guys had played an Aliens game that I thought was fantastic, and he put it up on YouTube, and I listened to the audio for all of it, and I'm probably going to say that it was Matt Shaker, even though it wasn't. But I do follow the YouTube channel. Man, I got to look it up because I haven't seen them post anything in a while, and I
Roll
take
for Effort.
Roll for Effort. That's right.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen Sea of Rust on there, or been getting notifications from the Roll for Effort guys. And I think that was the last one they did, was the Aliens deal. But that explains why. Then, if he's going to put this out as like a module or content or a setting or something like that, that would explain why I haven't seen it. Was not aware.
Yeah, I can't remember. the original Sea of Rust adventure might be on there. That was definitely one that Matt Shaker ran, and we played with Hank and Jason Scranton, and maybe Austin Redmond. And it was just fantastic. By the way, I will say the Aliens game, that was my game. That was the game that I ran on the channel.
Okay, I listened to all of that, dude. That was friggin' fantastic. I was not aware that you were the one that ran that. I loved it. And what I loved about it was everybody knows Aliens. I've watched all of the Alien movies. Nothing was a surprise. This is what I thought was cool about it as well, is that you picked a setting or a game that everybody was familiar with. And it's one of my big beefs being a dungeon master is that I'm the guy that has to read all the material, and my turd players just show up and I got to explain everything to them. They don't actually ever really have to do much work other than create their characters, and I'm rolling in. Here's my example. Savage Worlds just came out with this setting called Iron Gate, and it's a prison planet. There's 3 chapters, maybe 20 pages in the front of the book that sort of explains what happens or who's who on the planet, and there's 20 pages of it of 98 pages. So 98 pages I have to read, 20 pages my players possibly have to read, which is why it's cool that you chose Aliens, because everybody's seen the movies, so you could just sort of roll right into the story. And you did the same bloody thing. I'm blowing so much smoke up your butt right now, dude, because I thought it was awesome.
But you did kind of you.
You did the same thing, because you started off with like these little alien guys that were fairly easy to beat, and then you got into the heavier monsters that were a little tougher, and then I think they ended up running like in the third, because it splits into 3 pieces on YouTube. The third piece was like fighting the actual queen and stuff like that.
Yes.
I remember that very well. It was super cool. I listened to all of that.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you. But let me say, so it is a bit of like a bit of DM slumming to run an adventure set in a setting that everybody kind of gets. You know, like if these guys they got aliens, we've been talking about aliens, so they understood the universe, and so there's not a lot of heavy lift from a DM standpoint to get people to understand the world and the dangers and the pressures and the demands of the world, and so that was an easy one to put together for sure. By the way, while we were talking, I double checked, and so the Sea of Rust, the first adventure, parts 1 through 4, all are on the Roll for Effort channel. It's under the Omega Lock dash Sea of Rust. So parts 1 through 4, you can jump over to Roll for Effort and watch and listen to the whole thing.
Man, I feel like I'm subscribed. Why am I not getting? Maybe I got to smash the notification button or something like that for it to show up in my my list.
Dude, we ran that 10 months ago.
Oh.
So it's but they're there.
I just hit the bell.
Okay, well, that would help too.
Right? Yeah. Get notified about new videos. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I forgot to smash the bell because I was trying to pay attention to the stuff they're doing as part of my learning curve. You're right in the sense that it makes the DM's job or GM's job really easy, but the cool part is that the players also know the lore, so when they're coming at you, they have a basis to go on, which really can help the story. Some of them can just automatically, they set down turrets and stuff because they know they have turrets and they know what they do in the game, and they know how things work. And so that's kind of a neat part that if you were to go in blind with somebody that didn't know anything about aliens, you sort of get into that what do I do lockup kind of a deal. They're not quite sure how they should react. So no, that's awesome, dude. I loved it. Aliens was super cool, man. If you guys haven't heard it, you should go check it out. And we don't get RedTube. I'm not sure what it's called. RedTube. Yeah, RedTube. Not Red. Is it RedTube a porn channel?
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
I have no idea.
I think it might be, but I was thinking YouTube Red. Not RedTube. I think RedTube might be. I'm going to have to cut that out. Anyways, maybe not. Maybe some people just learned some new cool stuff. YouTube Red.
Their subscriber service, right?
Oh my God.
Subscriber service.
Yeah. Well,
pay for YouTube. Yeah.
But if you do that, you can extract audio or just get the audio feed from certain things. And we don't get that up here. It's not available yet. So anyways, all right. Well, what else we got here? This guy, Frey, on the G Plus community boards has put together Magic the Gathering hack for ICRPG. I've played Magic a couple of times, but it's not something that I ever really got into. But there is a solid 14, 15 page conversion if you guys are interested. And this really speaks to the versatility of ICRPG being a rules-like system, because everybody is hacking stuff for it. There is some really sweet stuff. Victor just put out a hack of 15 different worlds that he created. We'll probably talk about that when Victor shows up, because he's going to be better explaining it than I am. And speaking of hacks, Genesis, the ICRPG edition by Brett Waddingham. I just want to say stop. Just stop right now, buddy. Just don't do it. I'm just kidding. It's just, again, leads to the idea of how versatile this system is. Essentially, all he's really done is he's just using the Genesis dice inside of ICRPG to, use it as a narrative system and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. One of the other things that just came out too that I'm really looking forward to, and we were talking about this pre-show, is Vigilante City by Bloat Games. Eric Bloat, man. He was just on the RPG Brewery not too long ago telling everybody how awesome my show is. So I'd like to send a special shout out to that guy. It's funny because I don't know who listens to my show, and then he shows up and he's like this famous guest kind of guy that has his own company and he's making games and doing all sorts of stuff. He's like, Murder Hobo show. He's like, I really like that show. And I'm like, oh, wow. That's kind of cool. Anyways, that said, they did this deal with this Vigilante City. He's got, I guess, his own kind of mechanics. I've read some of it, so I'm not sure if he's borrowed the mechanics from a different system, but the mechanics aren't ICRPG. But he did say that if he hits 10K, which he did, he's going to be putting out an ICRPG version of Vigilante City. So I'm wickedly excited for that because, the simplicity of the system has me hooked. You backed it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, with old Hankerin doing all that art, man, I really wanted all those assets as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wasn't aware until I saw it that he has done all of this stuff. Hank, you've hung out with Hank. I've hung out with Hank, not personally, but you have. But you might get these inside scoops and stuff like that. I know that he's right now. He talks about how he's super swamped with all of the. I don't remember what the word is that he calls them, but he gets the artwork that people request him to do or they pay him to do, and it's called something.
Commissions.
His commissions.
Yeah, his commission. Yep.
So he's super swamped with that, but you never know what he's actually doing because he doesn't. I've never really seen him say anything. So when Vigilante City came out and it's loaded with this artwork, and I'm looking at the artwork, and I'm like, man, that looks like Hank stuff. And then sure enough, there it is right there, Hankerin Fernale artwork, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh wow, that's super cool. Then you start skimming the book, and you're like, I have never seen him draw any of this stuff in the last 6 months, and it's just phenomenal, kick-ass stuff. I bought his Heroes of the Hammer stuff. That was pretty cool, and I converted them like we were talking about before, TTS, Tabletop Simulator. I've got all of that artwork, and I've made little 3D representations of all of the miniatures or all the artwork from the Heroes of the Hammer, and I've imported the sheets and stuff like that, so if anybody wanted to play in my ICRPG games, it's just a matter of throwing down the sheet. Here's the description of what this guy does, and here's the little mini that goes with him.
Super cool.
Yeah,
really
it's fantastic. What else have we got going on? Here's a couple other things before we get into the magic system. And nice, and oddly enough, we're almost right on time, which is fantastic. I figured 30 minutes, we'd shoot the breeze about magic and stuff. So we've got Michael Mock. Have you seen this guy's new character sheet? There's a link right there in the description. You should actually tab into that. He did... do I got to right-click, open link, and new tab? Is this the one? Yeah. Have you seen this thing?
Yeah, man, I'm using it right now.
This is my favorite character sheet by far, and it's such a good starter sheet. You got your health up in the top, your dying is there, spell burn, he's incorporated battle fury, all of the different dice with your racial bonuses, your bases and stuff, everything's in a cool hexagon deal. You've got your supplies, which is on there, and then your 2 spots for the equipped and carried gear, and a little coin purse in the bottom. Coolest freaking sheet I've seen. I think this one it's my favorite. It's very graphical, right? There's a lot of stuff to it.
Yeah,
but
it's really good. And Mike, if you're listening, I'm just a little bit mad at you because I thought about this myself, but you beat me to it, but you've clearly executed it way better than I ever could have. But it is a killer sheet, and I particularly like that it has the spots for the racial bonus as well. so that, if you're a DM and you're trying to improve somebody's character and you just want to take a look, man, it completely lays out all the math, exactly how somebody through the character creation process got to the stats that they have and the character that they have. And then I would say it's just super easy from the player standpoint. I mean, it's all right there. It's just money. He killed it.
Yeah.
Mike, you killed it. You killed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I gotta ask, isn't there's Spellburn and Battle Fury, but isn't there Dogpile as well?
Yeah, I think that's right. If you go to I think it's in the DM section on different types of dice mechanics that you can do, or variations of dice mechanics, I'm pretty sure that's in there as well.
Well, I don't see that it's been added to this sheet, and I just want to say, Mike, I'm extremely disappointed. Your sheet now is just... Seriously, it's like this is the plane crashing into the ground all of a sudden. I'm just kidding. It's still awesome. I gotta look that up.
So page 80, dynamic dice.
Mm-hmm.
Has dynamic dice, Battle Fury, Spellburn, Dogpile, the Blunder. All those mechanics are outlined in the core rules.
Yeah, I wonder. I guess you've only got so much space, and these are sort of the big two ones, right? Dogpile is for the tank, isn't it?
Ooh, I just closed my book.
No, that's okay. Yeah, Dogpile says tank type characters take a lot of damage. To encourage and enrich this ignominious, that's a big word that I don't know, duty, you can use, I know duty, just kidding. You can use the Dogpile dice, place a d4 on the player sheet, and each time she takes damage, on consecutive turns, you escalate the die by 1, and when it reaches 4, you can make a con check, and if you're successful, you heal. That's wickedly cool as a tank. Yep. You know what else is wickedly cool that I got to blow some smoke up Hank's ass for this one, too? Because it's so awesome. I freaking love when you're playing Warp Shell, the... take on a d6, if you roll a 4 or less, you don't take any damage. That shield that they get, that makes tanks literally like incredible people to play, because on a d6 you're looking at maybe 20% ish, 18, 20, 21% chance. So that's like almost like a 4 times 20 is going to be like 80% chance you're not taking damage. Would be less than that, 60 plus 60% or less. Quick math. I'm sure I'm going to get some hate mail for that, but you know what I mean? So, yeah, like you're not taking damage on 40% of the attacks that come in because your shield just kicks in and absorbs all the damage before you can take any of it. I love that. I've seen that in action in the Warp Shell game, which was super cool, and that's really neat. But anyways, Michael Mock, new character sheet, man. It's the balls. I'm gonna print some of these off and use these in my games because I think they're just that awesome. I came across today Michael Allen Newbanks. He's got this paper minis on this thing called War Game Vault that I've never seen before. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Drive-Thru RPG, but if you are, it uses that, the backbone for that. And I was looking at him, $1 a pack. He's got a ton of stuff on there for little paper minis. The ones that I was looking at was like little armies, like the Goblin War Packs, or the little that Hank did the art for, and it's just a bunch of little. They look like an explosion of goblins coming at you.
Right.
Yeah, he did that with army mercenary guys and stuff like that. And speaking of Drive-Thru, I don't know if you have a lot of stuff on Drive-Thru, Alex, but I have a ton of stuff. Most of my books come through Drive-Thru. I bought the PDF and stuff. The library sync feature for Drive-Thru is the stink. Everything is sorted by the company that produces it. I don't know what companies produce the book. I know the book, but I don't know the company. Like I know Runehammer, but other companies, I don't know who wrote them. Anyways, it kind of threw me off a little bit, but I've actually just recently switched back to using it, because I found that the search window inside of this library sync is actually pretty good. So I fire up my Drive-Thru RPG sync program. I hit the search button. If I'm looking for, say, 50 Fathoms, I just type in 50F, and it comes up with the options, and there's a button right there that I can press open, and it'll open it in my PDF reader. So it's equally as easy to go that route as it would be to, say, open my Windows Explorer and find it in my custom file system. However, if Drive-Thru RPG guys or Hankerin is actually listening to this, the Core 2.0 book is not listed in this sync up thing. So you've got the original one, like version 1.35 is all in here, but the Core 2.0 doesn't show up. The character sheets, online play assets, print and play. I'm going to send this to Hank too, just to remind him. I just realized this morning that I can't find the Core 2.0 books. But Drive-Thru RPG sync thing is actually starting to work out for me. I was actually pretty happy. And then, Alex, last thing on the list, man. Morn Skaop. I'm not even sure how you pronounce his name. He's the guy that did Winter Eternal for Savage Worlds, and I think somebody's actually, probably Victor, has converted it into ICRPG. I hope your dad's doing well, Morning. I know you listen to the show. He's been pumping out some gaming maps that are 3D-ish that I think are really cool. He's been doing a lot of that sort of 3D, flat 3D perspective kind of things. I'm not sure what they're called again, man. My vocabulary is the stank today. But they're great for online gaming. He's the creator guy for Winter Eternal once again. So he's got Map Sheet Games. I'll put links to all of the stuff that we talked about in the news, in the show notes, and that's gonna be it. We're cutting her short. Let's get over to the main topic. Maybe we'll spend a little less time talking about Magic, maybe not. I asked Alex to come on the show, and he's like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. And I'm like, we can talk about anything ICRPG. So I chose the topic of Magic because it's one of the things that I see most inside the game that people ask questions about. One of the latest ones was, what's the difference between int and whiz spells? And why is there a difference and stuff like that? But, so generically back in the day when Dungeons and Dragons was, or not when it was a thing, it still is a thing, but the difference between them sort of spawns from that, where you've got your int spells are basically for your mages, and your wisdom spells were always the priestly holy spellcasting guys. So there really is, that's the difference between the two of them. And that dynamic has carried over into ICRPG. Any kind of intellect spell is basically going to be like a damage DPS. That's generically what sort of int or mage caster guys have done. Maybe invisibility. But it's not really like a buffing, where wisdom spells have also sort of been a buffing. I'm curious to know, though, Alex, how you use spells in your game. Have you got any kind of specific setting rules that you like to imply? Because I've got a couple that we'll get into, and you can tell me how much they stink.
Oh, I don't know about that. About the only thing that I can say about using magic in my games is I generally apply spell burn to folks, and my rule is usually 4. So you can get 4 of any spells off before you in any combination before you have to apply spell burn and roll against the target. And of course, if you make the roll, then you just keep on casting. If you fail the roll, you roll the 1d4, and for that many rounds, you're experiencing some spell fatigue. And that's sort of my standard kind of general rule.
Do you apply that to both int and whiz spellcasters?
Correct. Yes. So any type of magic, or if you're using it as psionics or however you want to employ magical type effects in your game, that's my base, kind of my go-to standard when I play.
What is the straight up mechanics for Spellburn then? If you're using Spellburn in your game, you get a D4. The caster gets it, right? I'm going to let you explain this.
Yeah. So
it's on
basically
page 80.
Yeah, page 80. Page 80. But basically, the way I play it, and I think it's outlined in the book, is that as spellcasters cast spells, whenever they get to the 4th spell, they're either fatigued, or the magical power overloads them, or in essence, they've kind of reached the end of their pool of magic for the moment, and then they must make a check against the current target using either their int or their wisdom, depending on the type of caster they are. If they succeed, then they go right back to casting. So they get 4 more before they have to roll again against the target. If, however, they fail, then they are affected by the dreaded spell burn or spell fatigue. And at that point, they roll a 1d4, and whatever that number is on the 1d4, that's how many rounds that they cannot use spells.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so that's my basic rule.
Yeah, then they got to start using their weapons or their wits instead of just, doing some blasting, which is pretty
Correct.
neat. I like that dynamic dice feature as an added deal to any kind of a caster. Which leads me to sort of my next question is, why is there no spell limits other than that? Because these dynamic dice are an option, like anything is basically inside of ICRPG. They're just an option. Why did Hankerin not use not only spell levels, which is another question, but let's just stick with the first one. Why is there no mana in this game? There's no magic points. You can just cast and cast and cast as much as you want. Do you have any insight into that? Which I think is really cool, by the way, because that really makes magic casters feel powerful, like they don't have restrictions and they can just do this stuff.
Right. So I think this is a complex question, and it calls for somewhat of a complex answer. And certainly I don't speak for Hank, but I can tell you sort of what is my best guess, which is that, so for one, at a basic level, Index Card RPG has no levels other than kind of a soft milestone leveling system from a game design or game mechanics standpoint. And one of the reasons why there is no leveling in Index Card RPG is because there's really no scaling or attempt to create scaling. And that is the idea. Scaling is the idea that as you level up, the enemies also kind of level up and become harder at kind of the same rate. I will say scaling is kind of a psychological trick in games because it makes you feel like you're making progress. But the reality is, if the enemies didn't also scale at the same level that you leveled up or progressed, then you would just crush through everything and the game wouldn't be fun. And you would have a really hard time as a DM, for example, challenging your players and making them feel tension and pinch in the fiction. Scaling at best, when it's done well, the levels cancel each other out. So as the players progress, the monsters progress, and the difficulty kind of remains the same as the numbers get bigger, and also, by the way, the math gets bigger. But scaling can also be very problematic, and there are a lot of games that kind of fail and cave in on themselves because ultimately you end up with kind of this imbalance as the numbers get higher. Then DMs have to work harder to try to throw monsters at players, and then that's when you end up with all these crazy like CR charts and stuff like this to try to compare levels of monsters to levels of players, and what a nightmare from a busy DM standpoint. And so ICRPG at its core removes all these clunky type mechanics. It removes scaling. It keeps the numbers very, very small, so you're saving on time. It's keeping the game fast. You don't have all this nonsense. And so if you don't have scaling in terms of leveling generally, then you don't have spells that have levels either. It's all kind of flat in a way. And really, probably the main reason is to keep all that kind of clunky stuff out. And I will tell you, frankly, I appreciate as a DM and a player this idea that if I'm a caster, I have access to these spells. I can learn new spells. I can have 100 different spells, and I can cast pretty much anything I want to. I don't have to track spell slots like you do in D&D. I don't have to worry about levels. By the way, the dice are all the same. So if you're rolling damage, for example, it's always a D8. So that's kind of flat in a way. So in essence, because spells do not level and because the dice are flat, there are no spell levels in Index Card RPG. It's way more simple. It's way more accessible for new players. This is what you get, and really about the only thing that potentially checks that is the spell burn mechanic. Did that make sense and answer your question? I know that was kind of a long-winded answer to kind of answer that piece.
No, I think it's actually the perfect answer, because that is sort of the underlying deal with ICRPG is simplicity. Let's get rid of the levels. Let's get rid of the spell points. Let's get rid of the the number of spells you can cast. All of that kind of stuff. Let's just be done with it, because it just leads to the clunkiness of other systems. And it's like when like we talked pre-show, when or maybe even in the show now, because it's been 50 minutes, I might have forgot. But it's like the bolt mechanic that we talked about. There's things to it that you need to remember. And if you forget, then all of a sudden the game comes to a grinding halt while somebody gets their book out, tries to find out where the bolt spell is because they didn't write it down or any of that stuff. You know what I mean? And that's what I love about ICRPG, just the flow, man. It just goes. It's the only thing that I will say is you used the word flat twice, and I don't want to give jackasses fuel for the fodder and say, well, the game is flat, because it's not.
Yeah, good catch. Yeah.
And when you say flat, all you basically mean is that you use the same dice to spell damage is a D8 across the board, no matter what. But that's actually not even a true statement. Anytime you cast, let's say you're going to cast your straight up bolt, it's a D8. Here's the nice part about it. Maybe you've got a ring that does amplify magic that you found somewhere on one of your adventures that is going to allow you to roll 2d8. Maybe it's going to allow you to roll ultimate damage. But that flat number for that d8 can change depending on the cool stuff that you maybe find, which is also equivalent to leveling up your character, which is another neat way to go. The number of spells that you give your players when they first start. Let's say you're making a brand new character. How many spells do you allow your players to access?
Well, the rules as written generally give you 1, and that's the sense of that your starting spell is also the same as your starter reward for another class. So if I'm the tank, as we were talking about, and I have that awesome damage reduction, or even that awesome buff to my armor class as a tank type class, that's kind of my starter reward. That's kind of what makes me unique. For the spellcaster classes, they get a starter reward in the form of an int or whiz spell, but only 1, just like the other classes. That gives them their starting item, so to speak, in the world, and kind of defines their character. That being said, my personal preference is I generally like spellcasters to start out being able to do a couple of things. I would say having a couple of spells. Frankly, even I've run games like pick 4 spells, any 4 you want. I don't care. Pick 4, and you can cast any one of those 4 spells. The reality is, in for this type of decision, if you're a game master and you're running your game, it really is your decision. It's up to you in terms of your players and your setting, how many spells they can start off with. I know some people say, well, but if they have 4 spells, like, doesn't that make them eminently superpowered? And to that, I would say, well, no, not if you're also using spell burn, as I typically do. And so they can cast any one of those 4, and then they have to apply spell burn, and that doesn't necessarily put them on any different footing than any of the other characters. That being said, I will say, and this also kind of goes to the other piece before, with no spell levels, there are some incredibly powerful spells in Index Card RPG. so if you don't think that there is powerful magic in the game, I will tell you there are some incredibly powerful spells.
Arcane Bomb.
Yeah, Arcane Bomb. Turn to page 46 and look at Seekers, for example. That's 1d6 kind of seeking missiles that fly out, and each one of those does a d8 in magic damage. So there are very powerful spells for sure, but I don't get hung up on, hey, do you only get 1? Do you get a couple? The reality is I like my spellcasters to kind of have some options. Frankly, I kind of like all my characters to have some options, and so sometimes I'll even start games where players start out with a couple of milestones. Just so they have a few different things that they can do in the game. But that's all totally DM preference for sure.
I agree. I've been a 35, I got to rephrase that. I've been saying that for 5 years, a 40-year gamer of Dungeons and Dragons. There's a couple of different things that I like to do. I like to separate I want wisdom powers and intelligent spell powers to be different, like vastly different. So there's this guy Salvatore. Some of you may know him as the author of the Drizzt series of dark elf whatchamacallits that he's written. But he also did this series called the Clerics Quintet, and it is about this priest guy whose name is Catterley, and there's these Ivan and Pikel, these dwarves. One of them's trying to be a druid and stuff like that. But I really got the sense when he was writing this that Catterley didn't actually just have magic associated with the stuff that he knew. He could get himself into a situation and pray to the gods for the ability to sort of, use the magic that was available to him to get him out of those situations. Like he had this, it almost seemed as if Catterley didn't have a limited number of spells, but he had like a power pool that he could pull from, and in his communication with the gods or whatever that he prayed to, and he could use it basically to do any spell that he wanted. So I really like that idea, and that's how I separate my stuff personally. This is just me flapping. This isn't how you do it in ICRPG. If you're playing a priest in my game, I'm going to give you access to every one of those spells, unlike the spellcaster guy, like a wizard. And as you cast, you can cast anything that you need, because really a lot of what you do as a priestly spellcaster is enchanting or buffing or doing things like that. And then the spellcaster guys are usually all damage, like lightning bolt, the seeker spells that you were talking about and stuff like that. So nice. I like to give that power to my priests so that those characters, because they're not the damage heavy ones, they're the buff classes, it gives them that, hey guys, I can commune with my gods and figure a way to get us out of the predicament that we're in. Whereas a magic caster, most mages are glass cannons. They want to come in and just kick ass and take names. But I like that. I like to separate them. So here's the other thing too. With int spells, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so you're drawing a distinction, and I think it's a good one, between a faith-based caster who uses faith to determine his ability. Like he rises and falls on whether or not he believes in the power of his deity to grant these effects, versus the int-based caster, who I think the distinction you're making, correct me if I'm wrong, is that his is based on rote knowledge and study and training. And so he kind of has this DVD that he pulls down from, and if he has that knowledge, he can cast it, and if he doesn't, he can't. But in your idea, the idea of the faith-based whiz caster, he could potentially have it all based on his faith.
Yeah, he's spent an entire lifetime in the monastery reading the Bible, essentially. Like, we're just going to call it that for whatever. But so he knows all the passages. He knows all the premises and stuff like that. He's communed with his God multiple times and felt the ever loving holy touch of the Father, so to speak, for whatever faith that they follow. So for him, it's literally like reaching out, and if he's a good enough person, his God will bestow upon him what it is he needs in his time of crisis. That's sort of how I play them. Whereas the spellcasters, for intelligence, just like you said, their magic is written down. You move your hands this way, you say these words, you suck in the power, kind of a thing, and maybe it's glyphs, maybe it's the written word or stuff like that. But here's the difference. Again, what I like to do with them is I will give them a couple spells, maybe 3 out of the get-go that they can put in their book. But those 3 spells go in their brain, and they can just cast and cast and cast and cast, because there's no spells, no mana, or any of that kind of stuff. Right away they go. What I like to do is when they hit spell burn, you could. Well, here's the other thing too. They can write scrolls as a spellcaster, and you could give that scroll of Seekers to one of your fighters. If you could write it down in a certain amount of time. Maybe you want to give the guy like illusory self or whatever. You can create a very realistic mirror clone of yourself that lasts 1 to 4 rounds. Maybe that spellcaster has this ability where he can write that down, hand it to the fighter guy. the fighter can go off and now he's got, just rip the scroll kind of a thing, and he gets to cast that magic, but that scroll then loses its magic power. So here's what we can do with the intelligence spells. When your when your mage goes into spellburn and he's got to sit there with his thumb up his butt for 4 rounds or something like that, when he goes into spellburn, you as a magic user can take that page out of your book and you can cast Seekers by ripping that page up, but you lose that spell. Like there goes that magic. If it's not in your head is what I should say.
Nice. I love it. I love that.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, so in your time of need, you maybe, that the thing's maybe got 1 heart left or something like that. Your party's going down. You hit spellburn. What do you do? You're going to go whack the guy with your dagger or something like that? And no,
fantastic.
You just rip the page out of your scroll book, rip it off, or maybe your fighter's like, I'm going to, rip it or something. But you can give your magic to other people because it is literally like written word. You know what I mean? It's power on paper kind of a thing. So, and then they have to find, they got to find all their magic. They don't just get it. And that's how I like to separate mine.
Well, that's really good. I will also say one of the other things that I'm always on the lookout for granting a milestone in the moment, kind of an on-the-spot reward. So whenever I have a player who says something like, hey, Alex, I'd really like to kind of try this, and I'll give you an example here in a second, that's really a moment for me to pay attention, I think, as a DM. It's really time to kind of stop and slow down and go, okay, what are we trying to do here? And here's the example. So in the Aliens game, for example, when we were talking about it, Jason Scranton had this pilot character who used pistols. And he's like, I'd really like to kind of do this Antonio Banderas kind of desperado moment where I'm using both pistols firing down separate sections of the hallway.
Yes.
And I went,
nice.
You know what? That's killer. I'm like, I'm going to make it a hard roll because you've never done it before. But if you pull it off, that's an instant level up. It becomes a milestone. It becomes something you can do with a normal roll. Okay?
Wow, sweet.
And sure enough, he made the hard roll. And I'm like, your character just leveled up. That's something that he figured out he could do in the moment. And now he has it. So now you roll double damage whenever you use pistols as a like dual pistols.
Yeah.
As this kind of applies to spellcasters, we had this recently in the Eyes of Odium game with Hank, and Matt Shaker had this guy who, Urza, who could cast the basic firebolt. And we were in this dark corridor and our torches had burned out. And he said, I feel like Urza can control fire, that he can cast a bolt. I'd like him to be able to kind of create like a kind of fire in his hand and kind of hold it there as a torch. And I think that's a beautiful moment when a player does that. And Hank said, make a hard roll.
Yeah.
You've never done it because you've never done it before. And he did. And now he has that. Now that spell is in his spell book. Like he figured out a way to manipulate the forces in a unique and different way. And it was kind of like an instant on the spot milestone, which I think is a really fun way sometimes to kind of give your spellcasters other options. So I would throw that out too, in addition to your awesome scroll idea or ripping a page out kind of idea, which I love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, feel free to use that at any given time. This is the one thing that I think that isn't stressed enough about ICRPG is it literally is just a toolkit. Anything inside the book is basically you just need to make an agreement with your players that this is the way that you want magic to work. This is the idea that I like. Get into a little bit of a conversation with your players and see if maybe they like it, maybe they want to change some things. Once you've decided how you want magic to work, all you have to do is stick to it. Because as soon as you go to change the rules on your players, that's where there's a word for that kind of stuff where like they're all of a sudden they're pulled out of the realism of the situation and they're like, okay, this just became weird. How come so-and-so can do this with this, but I'm stuck doing this with this? As long as you stay on that path that you've agreed to, yep, then that sense of realism will always be there and stuff like that. Magic power curve. There really isn't a power curve in this game in that sense because there is no levels and no power spells or any of that stuff. In your experience, have you come across anything that you maybe find is like a bit of a power curve that gives a magic caster the edge over a fighter, so to speak, like for balance and whatnot too? There's a couple questions in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with you generally. There is magic power curve. That being said, there are more powerful spells than others. And I will say the one edge that a spellcaster almost always has over a fighter is that magic could be a unique instant answer to a problem, whereas fighting almost isn't. And so I guess depending on what spells your spellcaster is collecting, they could grow more powerful in a sense. One way is, for example, I forget the name of the spell, but it's basically the one where you just completely take over the mind of another creature, and it does your bidding for 1d4 rounds. Well, that's an instant into a fight. if your caster successfully pulls that spell off, sometimes much to the DM's dismay, if you plan this really amazing battle and you've put all this AI work into your boss, and suddenly another player goes, I'm going to take it over. And I'm gonna make it march off a cliff. Yeah, So I guess there is that type of potential power for your casters to grow more powerful in terms of the spells they collect. But in general, I agree. There is no power curve per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Dominate Monster. Which now that I'm reading it, I'm just trying to think of ways that I could screw my players out of doing that. And maybe I would not ever stop my players from taking control of the monster for 1 to 4 rounds, but I guarantee you that if they don't kill that monster inside of 4 rounds, which could be coup de grace, I might let that slide. I might also treat this as an effort roll where the monster will stop, be under his control, but if you whack it, that could break the spell. So maybe you could just send it off the cliff, like you say, if there's a cliff around, or it runs away for 1 to 4 rounds. Or I'm thinking maybe you got to do enough effort damage in hit points in 4 rounds, and then maybe it just breaks the spell and it comes to, and you can't dominate it twice, kind of a thing. Like, I'm just trying to think of ways that I would be like work around it. Or here's the easy way: always have 2 monsters.
Yeah. Or let me just say, or don't. Just let your player have that moment. And I will say we had a great one not too long ago where Matt Shaker's wife basically took control of this dragon we were fighting. She made it literally fly up to the top of the cave, and then she sent it power diving straight to the bottom of the cave floor onto its neck.
Oh, that is genius.
And so it took all this damage, and then she did it again because she had it for 4 rounds. So it flew up and crashed and broke its neck on 2 occasions, and by then it was basically done. And we killed a dragon that we probably should not have been able to kill, because we were way underpowered to take it on. But that's what happened, and Matt was like, "Oh my gosh!" and he rolled with it, and man, it was beautiful and it was epic. So
yeah,
cool stuff for sure.
Yeah, you never want to take things away from your players like that. You always, somebody had said it once before, and it's become sort of like a rule that I live by, is like, you got to be the guy that is like an absolute fan of your players. And if you go into it with that perspective, you're never trying to screw anybody over. You're the guy that's like, yeah, fly him into the ground and snap his neck. You know what I mean? Exactly. That's pretty funny. The thing about mages balancing against fighters is kind of a big thing in all games. In Savage Worlds, I like to compare Savage Worlds a lot, because inside of Dungeons and Dragons, they'll at 3rd level they'll give your fighter an extra die type of damage, or they'll give them an extra attack or something like that to sort of run the numbers. There's always this number crunch that they got to do where they're comparing how much damage a fighter can do to how much a mage can do, and I don't like or believe in that system. I think that you can be an absolute powerful mage, but you're literally like made of glass, like as opposed to a fighter where he may not be doing as much damage, or unless you made like a DPS fighter. But one of the things that I love about ICRPG is just the loot, how loot can manipulate space and time for a player. And I think that premise eliminates the differences between the balances of mages and fighters. Have you had any experience with this kind of stuff? You give your fighter a flaming sword that does ultimate damage, And then, you know what I mean? Like, that guy gets compared maybe to a spellcaster that maybe the first spell he takes is Seekers, and he's like doing 66 damage right out of the gate, right? That's kind of like a holy crap moment for a mage to start with, which I think would be really cool, and I just want to do it now. I want to be the mage. Right. But that's how you could technically sort of balance it out in a sense, you know, because if you're just doing D6 and then you see the mage casting like 66, you might be like, meh, 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 meh.
Yeah, so I will say, I think the word balance, in a way, is kind of a dirty word. And Hank has certainly talked about this as well. Like, I think in game design and just in general, we feel this natural tendency to want to balance things. And I don't know that you need to. And that's certainly been Hank's premise on a number of things. I think the reality is, just in general, if you're looking at mages and fighters in ICRPG, there isn't a whole lot of difference. If you take damage, just for example, yes, granted, most fighters are going to be using D6 type stuff starting out. Mages will be using D8. So over the long haul, they're going to do better average damage, but then you apply spell burn. So there may be some rounds where they're not doing any damage at all. And I think all that does kind of quote unquote balance out. If you're just looking at strictly damage, certainly by the time mages get some more spells, probably you have fighters who have milestones, so they're doing cool stuff in terms of like Kedish chains, and they're stringing attacks together and all this type of stuff. So I don't, I will say, I think in general, they, again, quote unquote, kind of balance each other out. That being said, my general advice to players and DMs is don't worry about it. And the reality is, for me, I would just rather you make a cool character and focus a little bit less on trying to kill everything. And so, particular as we're talking about magic and mages, if you're making a mage, don't make it about power. Make your mage about knowledge and thirsting for knowledge, about knowing secrets, kind of that whole Gandalf kind of thing. He kind of knows all along what's going on. Make characters that people are going to really remember and that people are going to love. And as an example, I will say I have a mage named Ezekiel Adalbert Addison, aka old Zeke. And I'm actually going to do a voice for you, Gary. So here you go. So old Zeke is the guy who's just like, where are my spectacles? I can't find them. Oh, wait, here they are. They're right on my nose. And he's always fumbling with his spell book, and he's not always getting his spells off in time. And people love Zeke, and they love him not because he's this kick-ass mage who can hang with the fighters. He can do substantial damage when he needs to, but it's far more about him being this cool keeper of secrets and him kind of having this hidden knowledge about things, like, well, I knew it all along, kind of thing, that makes him a more interesting character than necessarily trying to say, well, how does he balance or compare to the fighters? Let the fighters do their thing, because they're always going to be in the mix and slashing and hacking and picking up weapons and more armor and having that type of progression. And mages are going to be collecting these spells and using them in the right moment to help their parties. And I think that's when the game is really beautiful. Not necessarily when you're saying, well, hey, this guy has this really powerful spell. How does it compare to the fighters in the group? So I would encourage players and DMs alike to kind of move away from that type of thinking.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. I haven't done that for a long time, but when you're 8 years old and you sit down, you're like, how come he gets to do this and I don't get to do this? This is really, you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
It's
how
cool
come he
too.
got the bigger chunk of popsicle and I only got this little piece? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just be happy for your friends at the table that they get cool moments to shine.
Yeah. And here's one other thing too with this in balance. Spellburn is kind of a way to stop a mage or add a nice element to a mage where you actually sort of feel like maybe he does have or does not have unlimited power. And then the dynamic dice for the fighter class is Battle Fury, which is the opposite of. So Spellburn will stop a mage from casting spells. Battle Fury will actually help a fighter hit. Battle Fury works in the sense you use a D6. Anytime you miss, you flip it over. Now you're adding a 2, for you go from a 1 to a 2. If you miss again, you flip it over, and now you're adding a 3 to your rolls, and until you get up to a maximum of +6. So as it goes along, it's helping sort of ensure that you actually get that hit in and do some damage. The other thing too is like we talked about, you might find a flaming sword that does 40, 12 ultimate damage kind of a thing, because you can literally give your players anything you want. And I really like the fact that ICRPG sort of takes balance and flushes it down the toilet where it needs to be. D&D with the CR and all of this other kind of stuff, and any other system that uses these CR kinds of deals I think are poop. And the reason I think that is because you get into the problem that they have with, I can give you a couple of really good examples. World of Warcraft. When you play that game online, they spent so many years balancing, because people would be crying, oh, this guy does so much more DPS than this guy, and he's, this is supposed to be a DPS build, that they would tweak the characters. They were constantly like fixing this class or fixing that class to bring them on par with one another. And I feel like that's what CR does inside of D&D. Every time they come out with a new edition, maybe they tweak stuff a little bit. And so instead of let me use this example. You're driving like a race car, and you realize that maybe your 2 race cars aren't as fast, so you bolt something onto one to make it a little more aerodynamic, and then the other guy's like, oh, well, I want that too, kind of a thing, and you just end up putting more crap on it to make it go faster, when you really should just take all the crap off and just let them go and realize they're 2 separate cars.
All right.
That's kind of a big analogy, but do you know what I mean? That's what I feel like D&D does. It's just basically like, when they're trying to figure out 5th edition D&D stuff, they just keep adding junk to it instead of doing what Hankerin did, and it's just rip the junk off and just let it go. And Savage Worlds is another one that does that too. With acing dice in Savage Worlds, everything is swingy. You can, if you've never heard the analogy before that somebody had made, you walk into a village as say like a seasoned fighter, and a guy walks up to you with a crossbow bolt and points it at your face, tells you to get out of this, get out of my garden kind of a thing. In Dungeons and Dragons, you would just literally like kill the guy, because a crossbow bolt to the face is only going to do D6 kind of a damage, and you've got 30 hit points. But in Savage Worlds with acing dice, that crossbow could do 50 plus and you're dead. And it could do the same thing inside of ICRPG. It's sort of built on that same premise, right? Maybe that's a magic crossbow that does 40 ultimate and you don't know it. I love it.
Right. Right.
Finally, let's end this bad boy off with give me in number 7, create a mage. I've got a couple of good ones that I really like, and we don't have to get into the dynamics of it, but just give me the flavor of a mage that you think would be fun. If you're familiar with Savage Worlds, I'm going to call it trappings, because that's how they use it. What flavor of mage are you going to make in a fantasy adventure?
Well, I kind of alluded to old Zeke. I really kind of like that that kind of older kind of mage. It's kind of a riff on Hank Zimmer, kind of this older guy who he may not be very powerful physically, but he certainly really understands, and maybe even has a meta understanding of what's going on in the world. Kind of like Gandalf. He kind of knows all along what's going on with the One Ring, but that sort of thing. But right now I'm playing a very interesting sort of mage in Warp Shell, and I'm playing a Psyker Fragment, which I think, interestingly enough, was one of Victor's original characters when he played that epic game of Flight of the Red Sword. But I'm playing the Psyker Fragment, so the Psykers are kind of this the typical kind of gray-skinned alien with the big, tall, skinny, with the big black eyes. And when I read that Psykers also have limited telekinesis and have telepathy, I talked to Matt about this, who's DMing our game, and I said, well, I really feel like Firebolt as a starting fragment spell, wouldn't it be better if it were kind of like a psionic thing? Like it's pyrokinesis. Like with his mind, he just, kind of stares at people impassively, and then all of a sudden they burst into flame. and so it really kind of made my character Quakes kind of this really kind of creepy. He kind of talks in kind of this creepy voice as well. It really kind of makes him kind of this kind of odd kind of mage in a sense, that all of his power is derived from his alien brain, which I think just is kind of a fun twist on that. But I think in terms of just classic mages, I kind of like to go with the old guy, make it more about knowledge instead of about power. I definitely don't try to min-max mages for sure. I really like it when mages can kind of step in as kind of the utility, or they can kind of make the difference to kind of help their fighters out at the end of the day. And I'm always looking opportunities to try to maybe make that type of character.
Yeah, that's awesome. Inside of Savage Worlds, they use trappings all the time. And over the course of the last couple of years that I've switched over, and I'm not using like the generic spells from D&D and stuff like that, I've really gotten into the idea, and I really like the idea of creating a mage that has a flavor to him. So I've got a couple examples, and these aren't me off the top of my head. These are like pre-built deals that the food mage, for example. He used to be a cook in the kitchen, and the deal is that the mage from the king's castle or whatever would come down late at night, and he would be hungry looking for a snack, and him and the chef would get into these conversations, and he would teach him these magic spells. And so the chef picked it up and started using magic in his recipes and whatnot. And then he would do things like cast magic missile meatballs, where he would shoot, instead of just your missiles, your seekers are actual balls of meat that he would pull out and shoot at you. Or entangle would be like he would create spaghetti at your feet and things like that. So that's the food mage is one of them that I always really wanted to play. I need to play more, but I GM so much. The other one, for my little last segment, Create a Mage, is in my Commoners game, I have a bartender, and she is a bit of an alchemist, and she creates all these spells and stuff like that, mixing different concoctions together. But essentially, her alchemy is like magic. It's just trapped with that flavor. So her deal is that she drinks shots, and then that imbues her with the magic to cast certain things. Like she'll do say like a fireball is a shooter that you can do, or his fireball's like it's cinnamon flavored stuff, right? Or like a what do they call that there's one that's like vodka with Tabasco sauce in it. It's called like a prairie dog or something like that. But she has these weird concoctions that she can create by mixing drinks together, and then she just shoots them and then like sprays the magic out of her mouth and casts spells that way. She's like a bartendress mage lady that you wouldn't think anything other than her being a barmaid, but she has all these weird abilities, and she can do some healing and stuff like that too by maybe using some medicinal herbs and stuff like that. But yeah, sometimes you just got to trap your stuff outside of the norm to make an interesting character.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that said, I think we've poked a big enough hole in magic. I would like to actually have you come back on. One thing that I don't know a lot about is Ghost Mountain.
Okay.
I get the gist of it. I like the idea that it's Wild West. I'm a huge fan of Savage Worlds Deadlands. And I would like you to come back and teach me a little bit more about it. So maybe I'm going to give you a homework thing, and in a couple of weeks or whatever, maybe sometime in the next month, we can get together and maybe go over what ICRPG looks like in the Wild West.
Oh, that would be really cool. I would love to do that. And Gary, just let me say, I am really, really grateful to have the opportunity to come on here and chat with you. It's been a ton of fun, for sure. Chatting and bouncing ideas about a game that we both love.
Yeah, and it's the thing too. So what I really like about ICRPG is the flexibility of the system. And even if you don't want to play ICRPG and you just want to pull certain things out of this system and drag them into yours, like you did with your D&D, I think that is the benefit of just buying this book and reading ICRPG. You're going to get something out of it. The time or die, the going around the table, the loss of initiative, the no more magic points, no more spell levels. Like all of that is just junk that you need to throw away because it doesn't actually add anything to what I think is the really important part, which is the story.
Yep.
And so yeah. All right. Well, Alex, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for enlightening us with some magical perspectives. I told you this wasn't going to be that hard. In fact, we're an hour and 25 into this bad boy, and I think you might have been a little bit weary about what we were going to talk about. But when you have the gift of gab, like some people do, you can have a tendency to go long.
Just bear in mind that my thoughts in a cup of coffee are precisely a cup of coffee. So take my ramblings today with that caveat in mind.
Yeah, mine too. Absolutely. That's what this is about. This is just a couple of old gamers that are sitting around talking beans about magic in ICRPG.
Yep.
Very cool. Thank you, sir. I'm going to split over to the outro and call this bad boy done. Well, that wraps up the Alex Alvarez special of the Threats, Treats, and Timers podcast. You can reach us at the murderhoboshow@gmail.com or get us on Twitter. If you can keep it under 140 characters, 280 now, something like that, at the Murder Hobo Show. Or, of course, over at the Google Plus page, Murder Hobo Show, under the Nerds International banner. Or you could reach out to Victor directly at the Google Plus Savage Riffs page. Be sure to swing by the Murder Hobo Show on Podbean and check out the show notes for some links to cool and creative people, places, and things, plus links to everything that's been inside this episode. Don't forget to catch our other podcast, Savage Rifters, where we talk about all things Savage Rifts. Tune in next time. Hopefully Victor will be back and we can pick up where we left off on number 7 last time, which was character creation, and we can show you how easy it is to make a truly vibrant character inside of ICRPG. Thanks, everybody. We're out.
The Murder Hobo Show is not affiliated with or endorsed by any companies mentioned on this show. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of their respected owners. All items are used under fair use and for educational and review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Murder Hobo Show, copyright 2017, all rights reserved.